There we go. Now I get picking up on that. Okay. So again, as I mentioned from the meetup description, this is basically a presentation on chat IoT as it regards to software development practice, what you find in enterprise environments. Anyone have personal experience stories regarding this that they feel free to share?
No, because I'm not entirely sure what shadow IT software development means.
It's basically rogue application development, not following processes, to an even greater extent outside of the IT space, and basically IT development on the business side. Think of your business side trying to build their own Java applications or Python applications, not following practices, possibly trying to vibe code their way through using generative AI. Of course, nothing's documented, security practices not followed, such as credentials to service accounts hard-coded in, or data stored in very insecure places, such as MSX's databases.
So these are people who are developing applications that they expect to run in your enterprise without following any of the enterprise practices.
Pretty much. That's, and also to a good extent that, and to a lesser extent, trying to, still IT sites, still trying to follow good majority of the practices, but trying to avoid like either using a platform. If you have a CI/CD platform, many larger enterprises have those. Basically handles that from application development, testing, then to deployment. Such in this case, kind of skipping out on that, basically just being using GitLab, for example, to keep for version control, nothing else, or maybe GitLab and HashiCorp Vault. And HashiCorp Vault is just for secrets, but still, like I said, trying to bypass the approved flow. And we did lose Tonka. See if we can get Tonka back, maybe not. Okay. Well, come on, let me go to the next slide. Abstract again consists of all hardware, software, or any other solutions used by employees or organizations that have not been received from IT approval. In this case, shadow, as mentioned, with software development. Basically, software development that's not done outside with IT approval. Another thing you can think of is as the reference of no-code, low-code platforms, business users trying those out for their needs, and while trying to keep it under the radar. But yeah, and again, it's a huge problem. Many organizations handling accessible information infrastructure. Larger organization, especially with the more regulation, there's also pushback because regulation and cause red tape in, of course, that slows things down. Business side gets impatient, I've seen. And whatever this is, again, what I'm presenting here is a basic set of controls that can be implemented on the end user side or client that can, again, mitigate this by enforcing source control usage and platform usage. Okay, and again, personal observations of what I've seen going on 6 years industry and what others have noticed as well. I did link it to a few reference links. And risks. Honestly, data breaches are a big one. If you have your users, like I said, trying to low-code platforms such as RPA is a good example, and trying to link together multiple RPA bots with a MS Access database shared on a file shared drive. Anyone, first of all, who has access to that share can view the data in that MS Access database. And also goes back to integrity. So one of the business users who does have access to that database could, I've seen this, accidentally swipe around, just click here and there, delete a few rows, and you have there as a result, data integrity is compromised because there's an intentional edit. It's hard to restore. And it's also, if unauthorized users can, or anyone can have access to a development tools such as Python, Java, IntelliJ, Rail, you name it, it can be misused, both insider attack threats and ransomware. Ransomware can lay off the land. What's available, if they see Python or Ceiling, for example, if it's a Unix system, it can compile their from there. Don't have to download from the external network. It's binary. They just build it locally as a user. And of course, improper handling of sensitive data in all three states, in transit, in use, and at rest. As I mentioned, this is without supervision of overall IT. You can't guarantee best practice will be used, and this can be very bad for especially compliance violations, such as an experienced developer. One case, constantly calling credit report APIs for credit report data instead of, again, more than necessary. And of course, as a result, also keeping it in transit. When again, they only needed to call it for bits once. And of course, misuse of data can result in costly compliance violations and also legal and reputational costs if their data is compromised late. Now, of course, I've noticed there is a strong correlation, also referenced in this paper by Zimmerman. Basically, the higher quality, the lower the overall risk something is considered, I've noticed. But usually, what I've seen for shadow IT applications, again, they're usually developed using low-code platforms or RPA. It tends to follow on to the low quality and then high risk or criticality. Again, if you want to see, Charles, you have any experiences seeing this?
No, I've never seen this chart before. Relevance and criticality. What does relevance and criticality mean?
Criticality, how important the application is.
Okay. So if you have a shadow IT project that's low quality but high importance, you want to renovate it.
Yes, definitely. You want to.
And if you have a shadow IT that's high quality but low importance registration, you just want to
keep it registered, logged. If you find it, yes.
Yeah. So make it an official app, and then it's somewhere in between.
In between, there's coordination where you have to work with business or developers. You can think of coordination as work in progress applications, or.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't have a lot of experience with this because in my environments, you can't get away with very much shadow IT. And we can talk about that later, probably when you start talking about controls.
Yeah, that's where it is. If you work in especially DoD, you have much better implementation of controls. I know this even in, I'm not going to name any organizations, but these are, again, we expect better, but there's always lapses here and there, even in the best places. And causes, obviously, frustration with available tools and resources available to them. Users are not happy with, for example, you only might have Java 8, users want to use Java 17. Not a really good example, but and frustration with or even a lack of internal development platforms. Company might not have a platform or users are not trained to use it. This is a big one. A lot of companies just new person joins, throw them in front with a computer. There you go. They don't, even when they have a very thorough, well-established platform, there's next to no training or next to none. So usually the developer might think of what they did other places, which is again not what you want, but and also lack of necessary support. An application it's critical for a feature request and implementation is critical for a certain development application. However, the platform is blowing off that dev team's needs. Yeah, the dev team might look elsewhere, which is not something you want. And this is also, we'll mention this as a control as adequate support and implementation of requested features for a platform. And again, platform, as I mentioned, your CI/CD development workflow. I'm not sure what you use at your place, Charles, but most places use Git.
Yeah, we're using GitLab with GitLab pipelines.
GitLab pipelines. I've seen Bitbucket with Jenkins. It's a common platform. With then for package and source dependency libraries, Artifactory.
Yeah, we're using Artifactory as well.
Yeah.
Rather elaborate setup where we actually have 3 different instances of Artifactory. Basically, one instance allows us to bring in artifacts from the public internet and firewall them with an X-ray scan. So if they don't pass scan, they can't get further in to the actual Artifactory that people hit.
Yeah. I've seen another approach that takes this a step further is having an open source software review board panel. Basically, developers put in a request to use a library. It goes through a quick review. Then it gets scanned in Artifactory. But yeah. And I've also seen, like I said, just doing a simple sanity scans automatically. Yeah.
It just depends. I mean, on our system, we have, I don't even know how many individual application teams building applications, and we just can't. And they're using all kinds of different technologies from C++ to Java to Python and so forth, and we can't really keep up with the number of software ingestion requests for libraries. So we had to automate it.
Yeah, I can see, especially large organizations that will get. Yeah. And of course, from the business side, the lack of support from IT or development teams to implement much needed solutions. This is also results in what I see now on business side, that business users try no-code, low-code platforms for their needs. most commonly robotics process automation RPA, as those are quite often drag and drop. But again, as the issue is, they're handling large amounts of data, especially sensitive data. You have to have controls to make sure that the data is handled safely. Adequate testing is another big one. Yeah. And examples, again, as mentioned, business trying no-code, low-code solutions such as RPA, and making it worse, RPA with MS Access databases, shared file systems. And what you don't often see, but it's still possible, Git repositories hosted on shared file systems. It can be accessed over SSH, HTTP, or by file path. And you can share a Git repository basically off a Windows file share. This is, again, the most rare, but most common I've seen are RPA and especially MS Access databases. And the issue with MS Access is, again, data integrity, inventory, and
I believe people still use it. But
they still use, yeah. And here the objectives of these controls proposing is, again, first to ensure only authorized users can access authorized development tools. And then to also ensure proper version control and platform usage for all user development. Of course, only allow access to approved software tools, third-party libraries, as mentioned with Artifactory. And for development tools, make sure that they can only be requested through an approved source such as Software Center or approved internal web page. Another thing to consider is, also file share drives. I mean, share Windows mounts or secure risk in multiple vectors. And the best approach will be to, again, just offer a cloud service such as Office 365 OneDrive. Box Enterprise is another one. So users don't have to rely on Windows shares, which are, like I said, both threat vector for ransomware as well as mentioned. Yeah. And another big one, ensure users can only log into corporate managed cloud service provider accounts. If you do use external cloud providers such as AWS, GCP, Google Cloud, or Azure, don't let users log in with their own personal emails. Make sure they can only log in with their corporate issued email account.
yeah, we enforce that, but I'm not entirely sure how that works. We have to go through some kind of gateway to get to AWS from inside our environment. Cloud, making sure they can only log into a certain cloud provider.
Mm-hmm.
Is that we go through like a gateway that limits
Mm-hmm.
that? Is that the typical approach?
That is usually a typical approach. Another one I've seen is if you go through Google Cloud's documentation and you have a web proxy, you can have your web proxy inject a HTML header, basically telling Google Cloud which domains are allowed to log in to GCP from that network. It's another approach I've seen, yeah. But again, usually it is central using SSL to log into, like I said, AWS. It's the most common approach.
Yeah.
And again, as mentioned, hopefully I'm not coming into real laggy. I'm also going to get on the client network. Again, as mentioned, only approved software tools and libraries. Libraries, of course, downloaded from Artifactory, as we already discussed. And again, using it, like I said, Office 365 or cloud service storage. It's managed by the organization. Offer that instead of file shares. And yeah. And third one, yeah. Ensure user machines do not have direct access to the internet. I've seen cases where, especially work from home machines, they can still, even without VPN access, they still access the wide web on the using a user's home network. It's bad practice. Everything should be going through a corporate network through the VPN. And of course, let me go back to this. And of course, yeah, like I said, if people can have direct access to the internet on their machines without being logged into VPN per se, they can still, they have access to, like I said, any cloud service provider, storage, any web IDE application. But yeah, that needs. It sounds simple, but I've seen cases where, like I said, not implemented. More controls on the client side. Will allow proof software to be requested or used. This can also include stuff, software service applications such as web-based IDEs. Yeah. And of course, everything has to be down from internal repositories. Artifactory, Software Center, if you're on Windows, or an internal RPM repo for Linux, Red Hat systems. And of course, strict user access to development tools. And this is important for both the ability to request or even execute run said tools. You can have restrictions on if you have that prevent certain users from, that only allow certain users to request software. But what if someone else uses that computer later on after said software is installed? They'll have access to IntelliJ, Visual Studio, for example, because the previous user had permission to request it, even though the next user doesn't. That's why, again, you can do it through third-party access control, app blocker, see if the users in a group, such as developer, they have permission to run said applications, such as Visual Studio. Equivalents for on Linux systems, AppArmor, this is for Debian Ubuntu, favorite Linux. Then, of course, you have SE Linux for Red Hat.
No, SE Linux is such a pain.
Yeah, it is, but it's the most thorough out of all three. Playing with app blockers, that basically it's only can restrict what a user can run per se. AppArmor, SE Linux can also, in addition to that, also restrict what said applications a user can use or where they can write to, where they can execute from. But yeah. And of course, yeah, again, as mentioned, big thing here is enforce the use of proper version control for all user developed scripts and application source code. If it's in proper version control, It's easy to audit. That's necessary. And again, more on controls of mandatory access control. Again, enforce the usage of version control provided by the internal development platform. You have GitLab, Bitbucket, or GitHub. Make sure that users are properly using that. And everything source code and script-wise is version controlled. Directory, yeah. And again, this is another approach I would say is basically running a scan on the file system, make sure if it's source code or a script, is there a Git repo corresponding to it? If there is, good. Make sure that Git repo is valid. References back to the platform.
What do you mean by ensure Git has a valid remote or .git has a valid remote URL?
Yeah, ensure like that is for the Git configuration is if you look into a source control directory, you'll see a .git hidden directory. That's where again the configuration for that, the local configuration for the Git repo is stored. So you want to make sure this is valid.
Okay, so you want to look in the .git directory and make sure that the configuration points to a Git server that it's supposed to be pointing to.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and also that the user is within a specified interval, at least frequently enough, keeping their code up to date in that Git repo, that remote Git repo. So they're doing commits as they should be. Also going to mention possibly enforcing with wrappers, but again, the issue with this is lots of overhead with them as well. And of course, another common thing to issue with them breaking, but yeah. Again, one approach is again having compilers and interpreters called behind wrapper scripts from the command line interface whenever possible. As your drawbacks are good to those, but it does provide most control if it can be possible to implement. You can do an authorization check logging, obviously, before the development tool is called. And of course, can also assist with ensuring proper version control usage. But again, the drawback is implementation and maintenance, and they still will require enforcement using a Mac. Mandatory access control, yeah. So, I know it's with
which meaning of MAC is this?
Mandatory access control. So basically, you can notice what you can do with AppArmor and SE Linux. Unfortunately, Windows doesn't kind of lacks this with its app blocker, but you can prevent a user from calling such as development tools such as CLang directly. However, a script the user calls can still be permitted to call CLang. Hence with wrappers. Again, like I said, it's getting into an area where again you have to maintain them for each tool. And still, like I said, it's kind of can be finicky and also can.
Yeah, I see the idea though.
Yeah,
it is a pretty cool way of doing it, but yeah, the maintenance could get.
It will get me. Yeah, because of course you have large organization. You have many tools: CLang, Java C, Gradle, Maven. Have to implement them for like I said, each tool can be variations. It can get, yeah, very tricky with that regard. And again, as I mentioned, unfortunately, it's kind of hard, really, especially really hard to do with Windows environments, as AppLocker kind of really doesn't support, as what I mentioned with what you could do on Linux, where you, again, restrict direct calls to a development tool such as CLang or JavaC, but allow a script the user to call executes to call JavaC or CLang. And continuing on, again, using Mentor access control workflow. The idea here is, again, make sure basically users in a correct group, such as developers, only have access to IDDs, even if said IDEs or debuggers or other development tools are installed on machine beforehand. You want someone, like I said, from, let's say, accounting trying to run CLang. And this is kind of, like I said, using a specific root development directory. It's more of a improvement, I would say, to a scanning approach for the file system to make sure that each directory with source code has a proper Git repo that's configured.
So on with this Windows suggestion,
Yeah.
do the secondary developer accounts those have more permissions than the regular user account, or do they just have different permissions than the regular user account?
You could say, well, in this case, it'll be more the only different, but the only thing is that they'll have access to development tool suites, such as, like I said, Visual Studio, IntelliJ, Eclipse, WAN.
So what would be the purpose of their normal account then? Is that just for office use?
Oh, you're going ahead. Yes, that will be just for office use. Yes. Again, as mentioned, requires security profiles for every development tool. That is, if you look through, again, SE Linux or AppArmor, you can, again, my opinion, both of them do offer much more flexibility and control. SE Linux, as I mentioned, being offering the most control, but yeah. But again, with Mandarin access control for Windows, like I said, with AppLocker, all you have is the ability to basically restrict users from being able to use such development tool, or, like I said, Visual Studio if they're on accounting side, for example. You really can't control which directory they're writing to.
Yeah.
You still have again write process permission, but that doesn't stop users from developing out their My Documents folder or their My Pictures folder per se, as they'd have legit reasons to keep work documents there.
Yes.
And again, more on the secondary developer user accounts. User developed scripts and development tools can only be accessed from and write using a secondary account. As mentioned, this will work with Windows. You have a user on Windows. If they want to run, like I said, Visual Studio, they have to do a run as their secondary account. Basically,
Okay, so what you're saying is they don't usually log in with the
they
secondary.
don't know.
They just run as. Oh, right. That I
They
get
just run as, yes, sorry. That's the confusion. And yeah, this is again the most resource efficient approach I could find. But yeah, and again, we can do with standard file system permissions. just their regular user account that they log in with can still have read access to their source code, but that account can't write or execute. And with this, since you're doing a run as, it does allow for streamlined audibility. You really have to focus on whenever someone tries to do a run as with their secondary account for development activities. And with this, of course, you can limit to a specific development root directory, make sure which will streamline file system scanning. You don't have to scan the entire computer drive. You just have to scan their development account, which can only be written to or executed from using their run as account. Haven't really seen this implemented much in the organization. Besides, like I said, IT support, I've seen them having to do run as basically for when they need admin for something, but it's kind of like I said, I wouldn't consider giving, oh, I could basically say you're giving them more access because you're giving them another limited account they can access on top. But yeah.
So when they do the run as account, do they have to do a secondary authentication for that, or do they just have permission to run stuff as that account?
That's actually a really good question. Depends on like sensitivity, I'd say, but I'll take note of that. Well, yeah, ideally you do require an extra login, but so yeah. It's basically, again, another set of login. Yeah. Maybe go back to, yeah, that's where it was. So yeah, ideal if you want for most secure approach would be obviously to have them log into their secondary account, though it's again subjective. You have to consider end user experience. Yeah, but still, you're only providing them, like I said, a simple login prompt. So I'd say it's not going to be too much of a big impact on that. So yeah. Now again, secondary developer machines. So seeing this to an extent, some places have their VMware virtual machine developers can request, and that usually running a Red Hat Linux commonly, and from there they can use user developed scripts and development tools. This will be more of a sandbox environment, obviously. However, again, of course, more systems in the end. Of course, more higher-end laptops. You can have the users run the VM locally, or another approach would be virtual desktops, but still, those require physical infrastructure to run as well. So still, it's more resource intensive and as a result expensive in that regard. And again, following the keep users developing on a single root directory for user developed scripts and source code. Assist with file system scanning, which is used to, again, further ensure proper utilization of version control. Okay, and platform, as mentioned at the really beginning, adequate user training, which is I've seen quite often lacking in many places. They just throw people in front of the computer day one. expecting to figure everything out. They have given no debriefing on what the internal platform or tooling is that's set up in the organization is. So they tried to, again, go their own way as a result, without knowing better or what internal tools there are. Another issue I've seen, lack of adequate, there needs to be adequate customer support for the platform, or developer support in that case. If a team or developer really needs a feature implemented, that should be listened to. This can be further assisted with inner source development, where basically open source development within an organization. Developer can put in a merge request or feature to have their necessary feature implemented into the platform. Can help when, especially the platform development team is either short-staffed, and of course you have to also consider providing a simple and low barrier of entry for existing projects. Legacy ones, especially those that are large, can't automatically assume that if you have a platform, those projects can easily fit into it. In this case with, again, huge monorepo projects.
Wow, this
Yeah.
this slide has everything that's wrong with my project on it.
Yeah. Yeah, again, that platform development is relatively new. It's also not really considered a profit driver in many organizations, even though it's the profit reliant applications rely on it.
Well, if I recall correctly, you had worked at Scott Air Force Base at some point.
USAA, then
Oh,
T-Mobile, then Bank of America. Yeah. So
oh, okay, it was somebody else who was on last time.
it was, yeah.
Yeah, they have been working on a isolated development environment that's that meets a lot of the stuff that you talked about so far, and probably more stuff that's coming up. They've been working on that for 10 years, and they're still not quite getting it right.
I've yet to see a place that really gets it right. After working in Fortune 500, second largest bank in the country, still all of them have issues with their platform.
Yeah, I've seen it at some fairly large banks. I haven't worked in the really large banks, but some pretty sizable multi-state banks. And yeah, we're struggling with it.
Yeah. Like I said, when I've yet to see a company that has this figured out and streamlined. It's a challenge, which is another research project in itself. But again, what I mentioned with a low barrier of entry for existing legacy stuff, allow them to get the SEM Git onboarded. For dependencies, allow them to use, again, Artifactory and of course, secure vault, credential vault, HashiCorp vault for service account credentials. Of course, there are going to be some variations with especially legacy projects where, even though once they have onboard to Git, they might have application will be so unique that they'll have to use their own CI/CD platform, or such as their own Jenkins instance, configured their own way. But at least once you have it in version control, you can keep track of where the application's going. Or of course, keep preventing supply chain tracks using Artifactory. And of course, and then credential vaults for sensitive service accounts. And of course, like I said, lots of work with that too. You're basically going to have to take in that team's or application's needs and built them into your platform, trying to
Yeah,
expect a 10-year-old project to morph its way into your platform, especially if it's a large monorepo, is not going to happen.
yeah, we've the military IT space is filled with 10, 20-year-old projects. So yeah, I've seen a lot of that where something comes in and it's just not gonna fit into the new,
Yeah.
slick model that everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to retrofit it.
Yeah. That's where, again, what's SEM or Git, those platforms, those cases allow the end team to run their, like I said, one Jenkins instance if necessary. Definitely want to keep that inventoried. Yeah. Yeah. And of course, repository scanning. Of course, all this scan for hard-coded credentials. This can be another challenge for very large legacy projects, once you have 10 years of commits. And way back when the application was new, the development team was not very security conscious. I've seen those. Basically, security scans light up like a red Christmas tree. But
Yeah, I think if you must use what is it, Truffle Hog, which is open source, and SonarQube, which can be okay for a small single project use, the community edition, but you'll end up paying a bunch of money if you want any of the good features.
again, that's Travelhawk. That's a new tool.
Truffle Hog is an open source project that basically scans for hard-coded credentials. It's an OWASP project.
Huh.
You get a lot of false positives, but it's pretty good at finding, like API keys that somebody's hard coded and stuff like that.
Let me see.
Yeah, it's been around a while.
Yeah, log. I'll look into it. Definitely, yeah. Of course, like I said, with these meetups, you always learn something new every time. Yeah. Again, we've used SonarQube extensively most places, but it provides very low level scanning for credentials on the repo side, but yeah. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's got a few rules looking for credentials. Truffle Hog will do things like analyze the amount of entropy in a value and say, yeah, that really looks like a API key. So sometimes, like if somebody has a hash in their source code, or even in a README file, and it's there for indexing purposes, like a hash of a container in a container repository, and it's not a secret value, but Trufflehog will find it and say, this value has a lot of entropy, which it does because it's a hash, but it's not a secret hash, so you'll have to whitelist it.
Yeah. 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 Okay. Yeah. So we got, yeah, of course. Next thing, also provide easy access to adequate test data for developers. You don't want them to take snapshots of production data. And yeah, again, it's a big one. I've seen very few places. Like I said, you have to build a system that can generate test data at reference. I mean, similar to what you expect in your prod systems, but of course, randomized. Names don't correspond to real people. It's a challenge in itself, requires the application too, but in the end, it definitely cost savings for security and compliance, well worth it. And also provide a streamlined process to request test databases. Don't want users to get desperate and try experimenting with SQLite or even worse, MS Access as their backend database. And of course, these test databases are easy to also inventoried, scanned. And going up here, after scanning for unauthorized use of sensitive data, you should be picking up your test data in these scans. Of course, checking with an inventory, what kind of test data is in there. If it corresponds correctly, yeah. Keep again, I'll check on that. Of course, occasional audits, and yeah. Yeah, test data management systems are, again, also a third one that's challenged for many places to implement. They do have test data, might not be up to date with their current production environment, causing issues for development teams. Yeah. But again, developers, they need to have something to work with to build and test their application with. So this is critical to provide that for them. Again, future work, as mentioned, better, but it's always a challenge with platforms. Sure that they have all the features that are adequate. Even the largest companies, large organizations are struggling with this. So, and that's what I have here. Anything questions on your end?
No, this is good. It was a good discussion too. Yeah, I mean the stuff that we've I've seen them trying to work on these isolated development environments for a long time, and the biggest problem right now is that if you're outside, working on sort of open equipment, you can get a library, in a few seconds. You can download a tool immediately, and developers are used to that kind of pace.
Exactly. Yes.
We actually had one developer just quit because he couldn't take the restraint. So it's a risk, and it also encourages people to develop outside the environment, and then you just sneak their changes in. So
yes.
So it and I've tried to explain this to people that it's actually a security risk to make developers work in a quote unquote secure environment that they don't want to work in, because they'll start to try to hack around it.
Exactly. Yeah. So you want to work with them to get their needs actually implemented.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
And that goes into the basic core of Shadow IT. It's 99% of the time it's caused by IT platform or IT support not providing the needs of the customer.
Yep. Exactly. Well, thanks for putting this together. I will. I'll let you know what I've been doing a presentation on TLS and certificates, because a lot of people get confused by those. My presentation is kind of non-technical, but I could beef up the technicalness and present it here.
Yes.
So I'll let you know.
Yep. Again, I already gave you my email in the chat, so just email me. Yeah.
All right. Well, have a good evening, and thanks again.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.